Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Krista and you're watching Krista's Catalog. In today's video, it's going to be my first ever wrap-up. In the month of January, I read 4 books and then I also read 5 mangas. The mangas I actually read for a video where I tried mangas for the first time, so I will leave a link to that down below. For the most part, they were pretty good. I also made a grave miscalculation because obviously this is my first time doing this. Out of the 4 books, I only have 1 physically. The others I checked out from the library. So the first book I read was Redwall by Jacques. This is the first book in the Redwall series, and it's a middle grade fantasy series about a woodland creature named Matthias. He is a mouse, and they sort of live in this convent, and he is really adventurous and wants to be a warrior, but they live in a time of peace. However, the reign of peace ends when a rat comes to stir things up and try to take control. This book I gave a 3.5 stars. It was fine. I enjoyed some different aspects to it. My favorite thing was Matthias goes on a journey to try to get this mystical weapon, meeting lots of different other type of like forest creatures and their societies. I found that all to be really interesting, how the different animals lived, and I wanted to learn more about that. But the actual plot itself of defeating this evil rat was just meh for me. This is just a classic fantasy. There's nothing spectacular about it. It does have a lot of religious undertones to it, but for me, I think I just expected a lot more from this because I've heard amazing things about it from some of my friends and some of my coworkers, which is why I originally picked it up, was because my coworker told me to. Also, I listened to this partially on audio, and the audio is a full cast narration. That was a little bit disorienting for me personally because there's a lot of different accents, a lot of different characters, and I just felt like maybe it was overproduced, especially since there's like music and sound effects involved as well. I also wanted to mention that the main character Matthias is like the most annoying character in the book. He is impatient, he is demanding, he's threatening. Just made him to be a really young, naive fool instead of someone like wise and intelligent. But it was a fun adventure story for what it was, which is why I gave it 3.5 stars. And then the next book that I read for the month of January is the only physical book that I have, and that is The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. This is the first book in Joe Abercrombie's First Law world, but trilogy as well. If you don't know, Joe Abercrombie is much in the same vein as Brandon Sanderson or Sarah J. Maas, where most of his books all follow in the same world or universe. This one follows 3 different point of views primarily. One, a man who was like this gladiator warrior type person, but since then everyone's died and he's on the run from some monsters when we first meet him. And then the second point of view is the Inquisitor. He is my favorite character, which I've heard from quite a few people. He's everyone's favorite character. He is just a slimy guy that tortures people for the government in order to get ahead with his own goals, pretty much. And then the third perspective is like an aristocratic's son who's trying to become like the new warrior in this competition. The 3 of them, their lives kind of cross because there is this war coming from the Great North, and it kind of goes from there. This felt like 500 pages of exposition, and I'm not joking. It was really good, and I was really interested in a lot of things happening. I really loved a bunch of the characters. The reason why I said that this felt like 500 pages of exposition is because there doesn't seem to be a plot. For the most part, we're actually waiting for the 3 characters to meet, and it isn't until the very end where they do, and then we're thrust on this like quest, and it just felt not rushed per se, but definitely like we're finally getting going, but I only have like 50 pages, so I'm gonna wrap it up kind of thing. And so I'm really interested to read the sequel to this, but I understand if it's not exactly everyone's cup of tea. The other thing that I wanted to mention before I forgot was that this book does include some fatphobic remarks that I found throughout the novel to be pretty annoying, and I haven't heard anyone else talk about it, so I wanted to briefly mention it. There is also some, like, I would say not very good disability rep, but that's just me personally. The third book I read was On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness. This is by Andrew Peterson. This is the first book in the Wing Feather Saga series. It's a middle grade adventure series. I think I ended up giving this a 3.5 stars. This follows our main character, Janner. He is the eldest boy in a family. They are living in this seaside town, and they've never traveled anywhere because of these monster guards that control the town. However, Janner and his siblings end up going on several adventures trying to make the most out of their situation, but that ends up leading them into a little bit of trouble as they stumble upon this mystery within Glipwood. This was a very atmospheric read if you're into that. I really loved the sort of eerie seaside port type town. I really loved the monsters in it. They were super cool. This book does include some illustrations in it. However, the reason why I gave this 3.5 stars and not any more is because the mystery does take forever. They never ended up figuring it out on their own. In fact, it wasn't until much later in the book, towards the end, where they were finally told the truth of the matter. And that's the thing, is they were told it. It was a lot of telling and not a lot of showing. It was a lot of the adults in the book being like, I'll tell you later, I'll tell you later, I'll tell you later. And when you have like 25 pages left in the book, it gets a little annoying. And honestly, the worst thing that I have to complain about in this book is the fact that I've read several others like this. Unfortunately, this wasn't for me, and I'm not going to continue on with this series. However, I do recommend it if you are interested in just a fun adventure story for kids and you want really pretty illustrations. And the last book that I read in the month of January was N.E.R.D.S by Michael Buckley. This is the first book in a spy espionage series, and I didn't like it pretty much at all. I hate to end on a sour note. I have not had a very good reading month. I feel like the only book that I actually really enjoyed was The Blade itself. I gave a 2.5 stars pushing it. It follows our main character, Jackson, who is the school bully. He is the most popular kid, and then one day he ends up getting braces, and everything goes from there. Basically, everyone hates him because he's a nerd now because he has braces, and the nerds hate him because he was a bully. And he finds that there's this mysterious thing happening in his school where I think there's these 5 kids that end up all sneezing at the same time in class, and they disappear. So he wants to know where they go, and he follows them, which leads him to infiltrating a spy organization that's among kids. They all have these scientific enhancements based off of their nerd quirks. So for instance, a girl that has asthma has the ability to fly when she uses her inhaler. And so Jackson ends up getting these powers for his braces where they become sort of like mechanical arms. This does read very young on the middle grade side. This had a lot of fart jokes and like that kind of humor. Once again, we also just didn't have a likable character. Jackson's not redeemable in the slightest. The author does attempt to make him more likable by, humbling him with this braces and making him a part of the nerd group, but he's still just unlikable because he thinks he's better than them. And even when he does start to have some character growth, we don't see that. That's off page. So it says like over the next few weeks, he ends up being nicer to kids. And the other thing is that once again, I have read a really, really, really good series where it's spies for kids called City Spies. And that book is so much better than this one, and this one's also really dated. It just uses a lot of outdated language that's not very proper or anymore, and I don't really appreciate it. I think that there's a lot of better fiction out there. Michael Buckley I've also read from before, and he's the only one this month that I've read from before, and this is definitely like the worst book that I've read of his. So he does have better things out there. It was just it was kind of a mess for me. So that is it, guys, for this video. Sorry to end on like kind of a sour note. I just didn't have a very good reading month for me. I felt like the best things that I read this month were actually the mangas. So again, if you have not seen that video, definitely check it out down below. Also, if you have not subscribed to me yet, if this is your first video, hi, welcome. But definitely make sure to subscribe and hit that little bell notification, because then you will get notified when I post new videos. I post videos every Tuesday, but then sometimes on Fridays. So that's why the bell would be helpful. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hopefully the month of February will be kinder to me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!